Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
On today's Your Take, I'm joined by a young stop-motion animator with an impressive CV. My guest hails from Wales, but is now rooted in the southwest region of the UK, where she lives and works in the city of Bristol. A haven for animation and creativity, my guest attended art school in Bristol, where she studied animation at the University of the West of England. After making several animated shorts, my guest has gone on to work on a number of animated projects. Her first credit was working as a runner and an animator on the adult action comedy feature Chuck Steele, Night of the Trampires. Her other credits include working as a junior animator on Aardman Animation's Early Man, an assistant animator on Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs, and an animator on Shaun the Sheep, Adventures from Mossy Bottom TV series, the Netflix and Aardman short Robin Robin, CBeebies Kiri and Lou. She is currently working on the Chicken Run sequel, Chicken Run: Dawn of the Nugget. On today's Your Take, I'm joined by Laura Tofarides. Laura shares with us her love of creativity and the cartoons she watched as a child, her early animated experiments and the short films she made, her time at art school, living and working in Bristol, the projects she has worked on, and her affiliation with Aardman Animation, and what we can expect from Chicken Run 2. A very warm welcome, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me on Your Take, for giving up your Saturday evening. You joined in good company because we've already spoken to a few film professionals, the cinematographer David Worth, a colleague of yours at Aardman, cinematographer Dave Alex Riddett, and Jane Hicks, who was a film editor, and she worked on Wind of the Willows and Danger Mouse. Interested to hear your journey, your career as an animator, and to talk about your time at art school and some of the projects I've already mentioned. But can we go back to the very beginnings? Laura, I wanted to ask you when and where you were born. Can you tell us about what your childhood was like and give us a portrait on your parents, what they did for a living, and do you have any siblings?
So I was born in Brecon Hospital in Wales, and I grew up in mid Wales. Around like Brecon, Hay-on-Wye, kind of moving around a few times. My parents, my dad did a few things. He was a physiotherapist, and then he kind of moved into working in adult social care, like in care homes. My mum has done a whole load of stuff as well. So she used to work as a graphic designer for Sainsbury's in like the 70s, just like hand cutting out, I don't know what you call them, like it's before graphic design software, so it was all like, you know, done with a scalpel. So yeah, she did that, and then they both moved to mid Wales in like the 80s, and you know, she worked as a cleaner, but she also worked in like various video shops. Like my whole family has, or used to have, like a chain of their own video rental shops. So Flickr's Video was like a bit of a family affair. And yeah, we also, I say we, like she had her own like cult film TV memorabilia shop as well when I was like a young teenager. So that kind of influenced me quite a lot. The kind of things that we had in there were really cool. We were selling, like, you know, memorabilia, posters, like doing some DVD rental way back in the day. And yeah, I've got one sibling who's called Adam, and he's 3 years older than me. Yeah.
Video rentals sparks back a lot of nostalgia from my point of view, and you mentioned the cult film thing. I want to move on from your humble family beginnings to early education. I wanted to ask where you went to school and do you have fond memories from your time there? Which subjects were you particularly interested in and why?
So I went to primary school in Brecon, Ysgol y Bannau, which is a Welsh language primary school. And then I went on to Builth High School for a year, and then I moved to Nugget High School, all kind of out in the sticks a little bit. I really enjoyed kind of, the creative subjects, so art and drama, but also, I loved biology and, I did like triple science. And I really enjoyed all those subjects. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure that everyone necessarily gets through high school unscathed, do they? But we're at the other side now, and it's fine. I don't have to do it again. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't much in terms of like creative industries around that area. So like everything that I was looking at was online or, through film and TV, trying to, it's tricky because you can't be what you can't see. And so you don't know of like future careers or whatever until you meet someone who's like, hey, I do this really cool thing. You're like, wow, how did that happen? Because like all the people I knew were just like farmers, or like worked for the council, worked for schools, worked in a shop. Yeah, so I was quite keen to get out of Mid Wales as soon as I could, like when I was applying for unis and stuff. Oh, actually I went to Merthyr Tydfil College for 2 years as well, doing a BTEC in film and TV. I wouldn't say I had a very happy time there, but it kind of, I'm glad I did it, and it got me to the uni that I wanted to go to. Yeah, sorry, we're just doing early education now, aren't we? This is pre-uni. Here you go.
We're going to move on shortly to your time at art school and escaping from Wales, but you've already established a love of creativity, and obviously that there's creativity in your family roots. Before we talk about your time at art school and living and working in Bristol, I wanted to find out where your love of animation and children's cartoons, where that comes from. What cartoons were you watching as a child? And were you making short film animations from a young age?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess when I was really young, my favorite cartoon was Tom and Jerry. And yeah, I watched a load of Simpsons and stuff, but yeah, my true love was Wallace and Gromit. That's what kind of got me hooked on stop motion. I also watched Nightmare Before Christmas when I was far too young. I was sat like on the counter of my auntie's video shop, and she just like had it on to entertain me. And then when I got a bit older, I was watching, I don't know, just like weirdy adult animation stuff. So I don't know if you remember Monkey Dust. I absolutely loved that when it came out.
I didn't know that one. No.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was Channel 4. Yeah, just weird late night animation stuff. And then kind of move on to like when Leica Studios opened, and Coraline was the first film that I saw in 3D, which just like absolutely blew my mind. And like I couldn't really conceive of such like a high level of animation. I'd just never seen that before. I actually watched it today. It's just so good. It's like Coraline and Paranorman are like two really big important films for me. And yeah, I guess like Mum's shop kind of feeds into this like love of film and cinema as well, because yeah, as I say, we were like renting out the DVDs, but it was like specifically like a kind of 1950s horror film shop. And so like I watched a ton of that when I was growing up, kind of cultivated this love of like rubber monsters and like aliens, and yeah, like some are really genuinely scary, even though they're just like rubber monsters and stuff. But I feel like, yeah, there was a definite like, I was becoming a cinephile, kind of just being in that environment. And also, we'd go and see like various world cinema things and stuff, and Mum is a total film buff and a film lover as well, and so it was her who really like instilled that in me. And yeah, in terms of making my own films, so I can't remember, it was her, or actually I think it was my dad, got like a little handy cam thing. He got it from a car boot sale somewhere. It was really cheap, and it was one of those ones where you still like put tapes in them. And I realized that if you like record and then stop and then move the thing and then record and then stop and then move the thing, that it would animate. And this is like mind blowing. Like if I'd have done like even an iota of research, I would know like you don't need to use a film camera to do that. But that's what I did for the longest time. It's just like press record, count to 3 seconds in my head, and then just take it all into like iMovie or Final Cut Pro and then just like speed it all up. And like that's how I made my first animations. This is when I was like 12 or something. And I would just yeah, I guess they were like weird music videos, experiments in like claymation, making things appear and disappear, just like, you know, being a kid and having fun with it, and just put them on YouTube, see what happens. But yeah, those were my very first films, I suppose. They're still up there lurking in the depths of YouTube somewhere.
A love of animation, and you've cited various TV animations, films as well. And interestingly, picking up the Wallace and Gromit thing, and you go on to work for Aardman Animations, which we'll pick up on shortly, and the influences from world cinema as well. I wanted to move on now and talk about your time at art school, because you went on to study for a BA honours degree in animation at the University of West of England here in Bristol. What do you think you learnt from your time there? And was it always your intention to become an animator once you'd graduated?
Yeah, I always wanted to be an animator. What did I learn at uni? I learned a whole bunch of stuff, not all of it necessarily related to animation. So, you know, there's a fair amount of like how to function as a human, how to do your laundry, how to not kill your housemates when they're being awful human beings.
I still can't do that, and I've got 2 children, a wife, and I still struggle to turn on the dishwasher and the washing machine. It doesn't come naturally, but yeah.
Maybe you're the bad housemate.
Maybe one day, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my time there was obviously just incredibly valuable, and it changed the way that I viewed the world. And you know, part of that was getting out of Wales and just getting to know loads of different people from like all over the UK, all over the world. And in my second year, there was a study abroad semester, and I chose to go to Hong Kong. And that was truly life-changing for me. Like Hong Kong saved my life. I never even, I don't know, I was in quite a dark place at that time, and I was like, maybe I need to drop out, maybe I need to like, I don't know why my idea was like, I'm gonna move across the country and start a new life in like Hull. And people were like, what are you talking about? So my lecturer at the time, Chris Webster, was like, okay, well, consider this. Instead of starting a new life in Hull, why don't you know, go to the other side of the planet? You'll still technically be enrolled in the animation degree, and you know, come back and see how you feel when you get back to the UK, you know. And that was, yeah, one of the best decisions of my life. I mean, the subjects that I took there weren't necessarily directly related to animation, so I was doing like jewelry making, experimental filmmaking, painting, and pottery, ceramics. But all of it was just kind of, yeah, just firing up like all my senses like at the same time. And they didn't expect like a huge amount of the foreign exchange students at the time, but I was just like so into it. I loved it. And like HKBU, so Hong Kong Baptist University, is known for being like one of the best film schools in Asia. So they had this really great kit that we could use, you know, use like a track and dolly for the first time. And it was just, yeah, really a really fantastic experience for me. And so I'd say that was probably one of the best things that I took from uni, is like a more kind of global outlook and like a real like a new lease on life.
I want to pick up, you said you were in a difficult place in your life, in a dark place. What do you think going to a different country, what do you think that taught you? Did it give you kind of a new aspect on life and a different culture? What was it that kind of almost re-stimulated you, and obviously coming back to the UK and pursuing your goal to become an animator, but Do you think it kind of just gave you that break that you needed at that particular moment in your life?
Yeah, it was a break from life in the UK and everything that was going on here, but also it's just such a shock to the system. You know, I was kind of thrown in. I didn't know any of the people that there were a few people from my uni who went there, but I didn't know them beforehand. I think it's just like a total reset. And the people that I was speaking to, it's a literal broadening of horizons. Like, okay, everything isn't just like South Wales and poverty and sadness, and like there's so much more out in the world. That it was just that realization, really, that there's so much more. And also when I was there, I was able to do some traveling, like to other nearby Asian countries as well, and that was just really, really incredible. It just and it gave me a love for like Hong Kong new wave cinema as well, so I'll talk about that later. But love a bit of Wong Kar-wai.
Back in the UK, and we'll shortly talk about your breakthrough into the animation industry. But before we do so, I wanted to ask you, before working professionally as an animator, can you talk about your early experiments in animation and some of the films that you made at art school?
So I wish that I'd experimented more, really, with the time that I had there. I think I was still very much just quite blinkered and making the things that I thought I should be making. Quite a lot of it was like collaborative or teamwork based stuff, and it's tricky when you're in uni because some people put in quite a lot of effort, other people don't want to put in as much effort, and like I was always the person like right at the front, like, okay, let's do the thing, I love it. And I was sometimes carrying some of my colleagues, and that gave me the impression that I didn't like teamwork. But actually I've learned since then that that's not what the industry is like. Like, you won't get hired if you're not good at your job and you're not passionate. So like the troubles that I was having in uni with like the teamwork stuff was quite a localized problem, which I didn't realize that at the time. But yeah, I mean, my third year film was called Facet, and it was like a animated documentary about migration and home, and it was kind of based on my dad's story, because he was born in Yemen and he grew up there until he was like 8 years old, and then a civil war broke out, and so his parents had to send him to the UK on a plane, like by himself. Basically, he had like a little tag attached to him saying that he was like a migrant, and like, please, it's like Paddington Bear almost. But he was lucky enough to have a safe place to go in North Wales, so he went to live with his his relatives, but he'd never met them before, and he'd never seen like grass before. And he said like when he got there, because just the journey by itself was very grueling. There weren't as many direct flights, I guess, in like the late 50s, early 60s, so it's all like kind of, you take one plane and you hop to, I don't know, Cairo, and you have to refuel and you have to keep doing this. So it's quite a grueling journey. And he got there, and he just describes it all just being so green, and he'd never really conceived of that before. So I just really wanted to try and get across that moment of separation, because his parents then, they did follow and move back to Wales, because his mum was Welsh and his dad was Greek Cypriot. But that didn't happen. They didn't follow for another like 2 or 3 years. So he was just in North Wales with his sisters, and living with relatives. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a weird one, because it wasn't character animation. It was kind of different geometric shapes, and like shapes and colors representing like the individuals who were talking on screen. So it wasn't just my dad. I interviewed like quite a lot of other people just over the internet, who I'd met while traveling, about their stories of migration. And yeah, I remember doing an internship on, I think it was Shaun the Sheep 1, and Lloyd Price, who's like head of stop motion there, was asking me like, okay, I mean, this film sounds great, but why isn't there any character animation in your third year film if you want to be a character animator? And I was like, That's a fantastic question. I really wish that you might have asked me that like 6 months ago. I was like, okay, good point, well put. But now I'm kind of more drawn to the experimental stuff. I'm making a film which is, you know, I guess like a traditional stop motion film in the sense that it has like puppets and sets. But the stuff that gets me really excited is when people kind of break out of that and do things which are unexpected. So yeah, more experimentation.
I want to move on to the next chapter in your life, and that's your break into the animation industry. How did you get that break? And can you recall your first paid professional job and describe the experience of working on that project and what you learned during those early stages?
Yeah, so well, after uni, I did the 3-month character animation course at Aardman through NFTS. So that was at Gas Ferry Road, kind of in town. And off the back of that, I was able to get a job as a runner on Chuck Steele, Night of the Trampires. And I really wanted to, you know, move up and animate, but it was contingent on the fact that I needed to learn how to sculpt. Like I'd never sculpted before, and it was a, you know, a plasticine sculpt through feature film, so that's quite important. So yeah, I was on Chuck Steele for what ended up being like nearly 3 years, which is absolutely mad. And yeah, that's sculpt through plasticine, as opposed to like the way that we work at Aardman. We have like mouth sets, so a box full of like E and oo and ah, like all the different basic phonetics, and then you just kind of like smooth them in around the edges. That's like a really kind of quick way to work through lip sync. But what we were doing on Chuck Steele was more kind of classic claymation, I guess, because the director was inspired by Will Vinton and all that claymation stuff from like the 70s and 80s. It meant that like when a character is talking, you have one head and you sculpt that into every single phonetic. And also it's on single, so it was a very laborious way of doing things. And it had the propensity to go off model ever so slightly, because, you know, you're not like with the replacement faces, at least they're kind of pre-made, they're pushed out of a mold. But with the Chuck heads, you had like a reference head and you just try and make it look the same, but it was tricky. But yeah, so I mean, I worked really hard on that, and because it was an indie feature, they didn't really have like even a rigging department. Like there were people there who were making armatures who could help us, but we were doing all our own rigging. We were like ADing our own units. Like if anything needed doing, we would do it, you know. And that was a really great way for me to learn what all the different departments do and like how to rig my own shots. Like it gave me a really deep understanding of those things. And yeah, like I love being a runner as well though. Like I always like encourage people, and they say like, oh, I want to get into the film industry, but I don't want to be a runner. It's like I loved my time as a runner so much, because yeah, you get to talk to everyone, and it just gives you like a broad overview of like what each department does. Like I didn't know what a countersink screw was, but you know, Bridget, the art director, had asked me to go and get some, so I had to go to her and she drew me a little thing and was like, this is what a countersink screw is. Cool, I'll go to B&Q. Like it's just this weird like patchwork of knowledge that you build up doing that stuff. But yeah, so Chuck Steele was a hell of a ride for everyone involved, and it has recently come out, so you can get a Blu-ray, and I think it's on like Amazon Prime maybe as like a kind of rental. But that was very much like being thrown in the deep end, and I feel like to a certain extent everything since then has not been quite as difficult, which is good. Or maybe I'm just getting better, I don't know. Like I'm getting less cutbacks, less retakes, making less stupid mistakes. I guess that's the point.
From a hell of a ride on Chuck Steele, I wanted to go on and talk about 2 other early credits and projects you worked on. Firstly, as a junior animator on Early Man and an assistant animator on Isle of Dogs. Can you discuss your role on those productions? And how did those opportunities come about?
Well, I'd say even though one is junior and one is assistant, like those roles are quite comparable. I'd say they're both like being just, yeah, an animator with less experience, as opposed to like an assistant at Aardman is someone who doesn't necessarily shoot as much, but they're the ones who prep the mouths. But how this came about was that there were 3 feature films shooting in the UK at the same time. And so all of a sudden stop motion animators were like gold dust. So I was very lucky given the timing of when I graduated. So yeah, I was on Chuck Steel for like 3 years. And then like I had friends, I had so many people who were on Chuck Steel, then were kind of moving away to work on Isle of Dogs and Early Man. And so I already knew like some of the crew and those places. And it was Simon Quinn on Isle of Dogs. He'd actually offered me the role 3 times before I was able to actually take him up on the offer. So like I met him and Wes Anderson at the wrap party for Isle of Dogs, even though I'd not worked there at that point. And like I then proceeded to work on it later on. So it's all a bit complicated, but it was really difficult to say no the first 2 times. But I just felt like I had to see Chuck Steel through. And you know, by the time I towards the end of my time working on Chuck Steel, I had like multiple units and sequences to my name, and like to move from that to like the bigger productions where you're doing like sporadic shots. Sometimes you'll be shooting, sometimes not. Most of the time you're testing. So it's kind of a step down almost to do those things. I mean, I did manage to get shots in both Isle of Dogs and Early Man. So I can't remember exactly the timing. I think it was Isle of Dogs and then Early Man after that, or it might have been the other way around. I don't know. It's all in this big haze of way back then. But after that, it was like I loved getting all that experience and learning so much, but it was 3 years of intense feature film work, of being in a dark box of 45-hour weeks minimum. And I really needed a break after that point. So that's when I went and did some volunteering after that, just to kind of remind myself that there's a real world out there,
I wanted to just pick up on the role of the director, because I had a previous interviewee who was a makeup artist who worked on House of Gucci and was eventually Oscar nominated. And I spoke about working closely with Ridley Scott, and he said he rarely worked in close proximity or even in collaboration with Ridley. That surprised me a lot. Where's Anderson's role on Isle of Dogs? Did you have much interactions with him on set, or how did that kind of work, the collaboration with the animators? Did you have much interaction with him at all?
No, so Wes directed that pretty much all of it remotely. I think he did have a set visit one time, and one of the ADs told me that he spent like 14 minutes total, like having a set tour on the entire film, which is crazy. But I mean, he was shooting the French Dispatch at the same time, and like he's always got like multiple projects on the go. But also, there's a big enough team there, and they have like, the animation director, the animation supervisor, like everyone in that team knows their job and is ensuring to make sure that it looks like his vision. So what he does is send like very detailed emails and notes and drawings. Sometimes he will do the live action video reference for the animators because he wants to get a certain point across. And so even though he's not there, like it is still very much his film. You can feel his authorship throughout that movie, I think. But yeah, it was quite strange going to that after having been on Chuck Steel, where like the director was like on set all day, every day, like to review a shot. He comes into your unit, you have a chat about it, and it's like yay or nay, and then you brief for the next one. And then I guess Aardman was a bit of a mid point between those two extremes. So Early Man, it was directed by Nick Park, but I didn't have any direct interaction with Nick because there was Merlin Crossingham and Will Beecher were kind of I can't remember exactly what their titles were, but it was something like animation directors. And so Nick says what he wants, and then that information kind of gets funneled down. And so I was usually briefed by either Will or Merlin on Early Man. And then you say like, okay, I finished my shot, and I expected one of them to like walk in and to review my shot with me like in the unit. And then I was really surprised that actually, oh no, a camera assistant just comes in and sends it through the pipes into the ether, and then they all watch it upstairs on a big cinema screen without me. And I was like, oh my god, this is so scary.
Sounds like something from 1984, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, legitimately they get out like laser pens and sometimes you go up there, like if there's a problem with the shot, you'll be invited up to the cinema room, and people go back and forth with a fine-tooth comb for your shot, and you'll discuss it. But it's good. It's going to end up on a big screen. It makes sense to review things on a big screen. It does make a difference.
Interestingly, you moved to Bristol. You studied in Bristol, and you now work and live there and stayed in the city. But I want to talk about your affiliation working with Bristol Aardman Animations on several projects, including Shaun the Sheep, Robin, and the new feature film Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget. What is it you most enjoy about working with Aardman? And can you describe the atmosphere on set and what it's like to work for such a prestigious animation house?
Well, my past self from university would find this baffling, but I actually love the teamwork of working at Aardman, because you're like this big crew and you're like solving things together. Like it's never my problem, it's our problem. And there's incredibly talented people there to help us work out how to do things, and I find that incredibly gratifying. I'm trying to describe what Aardman is like. I mean, so there's two studios. So there's the big like feature film studio at the edge of the city at Aztec West, and then there's also the slightly smaller studio in the middle of town where they shoot some stop motion commercials, but there's also like HR and all the officey stuff there. There's also the 2D department and the CG department, and a lot of kind of design team are all based there. But I did my training course at Gasferry Road in town, but I've only ever worked at Aztec West, and I love it. I mean, I've come to realize in animation, like you're always going to be working on an industrial estate somewhere, but as industrial estates go, Aztec West is quite nice. It's got like grassy bits and some lakes and some angry geese, so it's not all just concrete, and it's a big I guess steel shiny building. It's very big. They've just taken over like another part of the building, like to expand, because they're shooting so many things at once. And once you kind of go through the reception area, there's like posters on the walls of past projects and crew and different things. Like also there's quite a lot of like kids send in drawings of Shaun the Sheep and stuff, and they get pinned to the wall as well, so that's really nice that you get to see that stuff. And then you go through some double doors onto the shoot floor of Studio One, and it's quite dim. I mean, there's like emergency lighting and stuff everywhere, but like by comparison to outside, it's quite dark. It's like dim and it's humming, and it smells like sawdust and warm plasticine. I think the first time I walked in there, I was just like, it was everything that I imagined it would be. And yeah, it is a bit of a rabbit warren, like the amount of units that are in there. So there's now 4 studios, and then there's like another separate, actually it's in the same building, but yeah, they've just taken on another bit in the building because it's so big and it's expanding to accommodate these extra productions. But I'd say overall, I mean, it's a very humane place to work. It's it's employee owned, and I feel like that made a big difference, like from when I worked there before and working there afterwards. Like people are actively encouraged to do things to improve stuff in any way they can, because it's not just you working for some shareholder somewhere, or it's we all own the company. So that's pretty good. And I feel like they're now kind of pushing to get like new ideas and new directors through the door as well, whereas for a while there was only like a few of the same people making things. But like Robin was made by or directed by Mikey Please and Dan, and it's like getting that fresh talent through the door is so important, to make sure that the company stays relevant, I think. But yeah, I mean, it is really impressive, the fact that it's sustained like a stop motion industry in the UK over how many years? 50 years have they been going? Kind of growing and shrinking, and growing again over years and different productions to still be going is really impressive, I think. And yeah, they're trying to like teach new skills to people. So there's like the Aardman Academy, which I'm mentoring on at the moment. So Aardman Academy was kind of So when COVID happened, the 3-month short course that I did, that kind of moved online, and they're adding new things all the time. So there's like model making workshops, or like, you know, whole courses on there. I think they do storyboarding. And so that's like actively encourage new talent and to like raise the skill levels of people. I mean, the course that I went on is because I think it was maybe Screen Skills had identified, along with Aardman, that there just wasn't enough like high quality animation graduates coming out of the UK, and they needed to address that, like not only for their own productions, but you know, for the benefit of the wider UK stop motion industry. It's like you need highly skilled individuals, otherwise, you know, people will go elsewhere. You know, if all of a sudden there's not enough good animators in the UK, maybe they'll start making stop motion stuff in other countries instead. So they like identified that need, and they kind of pushed to get funding for this course so that stop motion can live on.
Interesting to hear your thoughts on Aardman working there, and also how they've embraced new talent and had to change with the times, and also technological change as well. You also mentioned Shaun the Sheep, and I wanted to talk about you working on 10 episodes of the Shaun the Sheep Adventures from Mossy Bottom television series. Can you talk about your involvement in that series, some of the characters you animated, and can you discuss in a bit of detail the animation process on that particular series?
Sure. Yeah, so I think I worked on that series for like 3 or 4 months. I kind of jumped in like towards the end of production to help get them over the line on that. But so initially I was like being thrown between units a little bit, but I did manage to get a sequence in. There's an episode where the farmer has like gleaming new shoes for his birthday, I think, and he's just like going about his life, but Bitzer is horrified that he's going to get these new shoes muddy, and so he's just like, oh my god, like throwing things underneath his feet to stop him from stepping in muddy puddles. And there's this whole sequence where he's like pushing a wheelbarrow up a thing. He's like, no, you stay there, you don't dirty your shoes, I'll do this wheelbarrow full of mud up a plank. And it's comedy ensues, hilarity happens. But so I was on that sequence for quite a long time. I guess the difference between like feature animation and TV animation at Aardman, I mean, we weren't blocking. So usually on like feature animation, you get a brief, you might do a live action video reference of yourself or with the directors. You'll block, which is like a test basically on like 4s or 6s or 8s. And then you go for the take. Whereas on TV stuff, it's just like the director comes in, we have a talk about the animatic, they'll brief me, and it's like, and go, you know? So there's a lot more kind of pace in what you're doing. There's a lot less waiting around because on that particular series, they wanted 7 seconds a day per animator, as opposed to usual feature film level stuff is like 1 to 2 seconds a day. So that's like the difference in quality you can kind of see on screen. It makes sense. But but that was the first TV show that I'd ever worked on, because up until that point I'd worked on feature films, which is quite unusual, I'd say. Usually it's the other way around, especially if you're like starting out as a junior. You'll start on TV stuff and then like work up to features, because there's a bit of like a quality jump there. Whereas I, through I don't know, being fortunate, managed to do it the other way around.
I want to diversify slightly, because we've spoken specifically about animation, the projects you've worked on, and some of the techniques involved. And I wanted to come on to animation styles and also about experimentation, because you've mentioned that a couple of times in our conversation. There's obviously several animation styles and techniques. Which technique is your preference and why?
I don't know. I mean, I've kind of accidentally specialized in like plasticine character animation, which is a bit of an accident, because I'm not a huge fan of plasticine, but like I understand its benefits, like as opposed to like having hard replacement faces. Plasticine is so much more elastic, you know, you can make changes on the fly. It gives the animator more control as well. You know, it's not just like these are the heads and you have to do this. It's like, okay, you want to push it at that moment, like I can like push the face and like make it more expressive. So I like that about plasticine. What I don't like is having to constantly clean it. Like I spend half my life just like picking fluff out of things, and you're just like, oh my god, what am I doing with my life? This is madness. But like once you get over that little mental block, it's fine. But I really like to have variety in my work. So you know, getting to work on Robin was fantastic because that was mostly needle felted. And I'd never actually worked in that before. Well, my mum had taught me like a couple months beforehand, just as like a hobby that she'd picked up, and it turns out to be a really useful skill to know. But yeah, there's just, you can shoot quicker because you're not constantly cleaning plasticine, and like for that project it obviously made a lot more sense visually. Like it has such a warmth to it and people really kind of connect with them. They look like, you know, fluffy teddy bears that you would have as like stuffed toys for kids or whatever. So you know, it totally fit that project. But I really love really like expressive and experimental like 2D work. I feel like what you get from that is like in stop motion, sometimes we're kind of constrained by the fact that it's a physical puppet, it's there, and unless you make like replacements, which is quite a lot of work, then you know it tends to have the look and feel of something in our physical world, you know, whereas in 2D I feel like you can break those boundaries so much easier because, you know, you can like morph shapes into other things. And it's not to say you can't do that in stop motion, it's just more difficult to do that. And I also have a bit of a love for like really strange freaky CG shorts where they're just like working with the fact that it's an artifact in a computer, that you don't have to obey the laws of physics. You can have things like drop through the floor, you can have things shatter and morph and do really weird stuff, and so you get so much across by doing that. Like you can show someone's expression not by having them do a big Wallacey smile, but by having them, I don't know, they feel really sad, they shatter into 1,000 pieces, they, you know, it just gives you more possibilities, I think. So that's what excites me, more variety.
I want to come on to influences, because during our conversation, you mentioned being a cinema buff and liking the variety of filmmakers and films, particularly world cinema. But who would you cite in regard to filmmakers, animators, or production crew specializing in animation, or maybe even outside of the animated theatre? Who would you cite as an influence and why? And how have these creatives influenced your own work?
I mean, someone whose work that I absolutely love, that's got nothing to do with animation, is Werner Herzog. So he's a German documentary filmmaker. He has made like fiction films as well, but they're so bold and fearless and weird. Encounters at the End of the World is one of my favorite films because it's so moving and strange, but also funny. I don't know if it's intended to be funny or not, but I just find his like absolute deadpan delivery on some of the lines just makes me laugh. And I do still have like a love of documentary as well. So I guess he inspires me by, I mean, he's written books, he's done masterclasses and all this stuff, and he's very much of the opinion of like, you know, do the thing and ask for forgiveness later, which is, you know, I guess more like guerrilla filmmaking. But yeah, he just doesn't have fear about it, which I think is what I find inspiring from him. I really love Robin and like Mikey and Dan's previous works. So Eagleman Stag and Marilyn Miller, one of them won a BAFTA, but I always forget which one. So it's done using like plastizote polystyrene type stuff, and so the puppets and the sets and everything is made out of like one material, and it's got a very kind of ethereal quality, the way that the light hits it, and you know, they really play with that, and it's just it's just really incredible visually. But I love the story of in Marilyn Miller as well, because it's kind of about someone struggling with their own creativity and like what that means for them. And by the end of the film, she's like destroying her own sculptures in front of like an audience of art critics because they think that it's performance theatre. I don't know. I really love that film. And other, I guess, like crews who I find like influential. So there's like Blink Inc. and Clapham Road Studios work together quite often. So making either like music videos, short films, what have you, there. And I've been lucky enough to work on a few of those. And yeah, they're just a really dedicated team, and it's a very nice atmosphere in Clapham Road. Like they do, it's just a shoot space, so sometimes they shoot live action stuff there as well. But yeah, the stuff that comes out of Blink is just like really new and innovative, and they're willing to take risks. So there's a show now called Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Have you heard of it?
No, I don't know that. No.
So it's just come out on Channel 4 as like I think maybe it's like a 6-part series, but it's just these episodes, and it's taken them so long to get it to that point, like for a TV show, but they have like a crazy fervent following online because it started off as maybe 8 like YouTube short films. Essentially, they were like 5 minutes long. They're just really strange and creepy, but like Blink, you know, bankrolled those first episodes, and because they were willing to take the risk, and they, you know, it's paid off for them. So yeah, I love it when that happens. And it helps me to kind of think outside the box as well, and to see what can be achieved, like when we push the medium. So it is like a live action show, but it has quite a lot of stop motion in it as well, like weird little elements, which I like, helps to add to the gross out creepiness of it.
Laura, sorry, carry on. I was rude there and interrupted.
Well, I was just going to say about Johnny Kelly as well. So I don't think he signed with Blink. He signed with another London production house whose name escapes me at the moment. But so he kind of has a design background, but works in stop motion. So he made this Chipotle advert maybe a decade ago now, and they're these kind of like little round people and little pill pigs, and it's showing how Chipotle are improving their farming methods to make the welfare better for the animals. But I remember seeing this in uni and being like just so excited by the visuals of it, and like the playfulness of the shapes and how he'd use that to tell the story. And then I was really lucky and excited because I actually got to work on the sequel to that advert like maybe 2 years ago now, which was kind of, we all called it Chipotle 2, I don't know, but it's like in the same vein. So it's, yeah, really exciting to get to work with Johnny Kelly on those things that I'd always like idolized when I was in uni.
Laura, I wanted to come on to shortly another string in your bow, which is being a guest lecturer and running animation workshops. But before we do so, some interesting choices in regard to influences. Werner Herzog in particular, a key director in the German New Wave, and Aguirre Wrath of God is an incredible film, and so is Fitzcarraldo. But I kind of have quite a strong knowledge on world cinema, and there's many world cinema directors who are a huge influence on me, but I feel I need to go away from this interview and see more of Werner Herzog's work, because I don't feel I know enough or have seen enough. But I rate him as an actor as well. I've seen him in a few bits and pieces, and he crops up in the Mandalorian TV series as a villain.
Yeah.
And he's good because he's very quiet but very sinister at the same time.
Very sinister.
And he's an interesting guy, a very intellectual man. Made some really interesting films. From Werner Herzog and your influences now to being involved in guest lecturing and workshops, giving back your knowledge to younger people wanting to get into animation, can you share with us your experiences in this area? And do you have any plans to maybe pursue a second career in education?
I mean, I started doing guest lecturing when my lecturers from uni basically invited me back to kind of talk to them. So it was like, I never really thought about it. It was just something that was kind of offered to me, which was really nice. Yeah, I've I've done quite a few uni talks. Like I think stuff moving on to Zoom has really helped with that, because, you know, it used to be a bit laborious, like, okay, sure, I'll drive like halfway across the country to go to a university and do a talk for an hour and then go all the way back. Whereas great, I can just log onto my laptop and do that now. And I've done, yeah, quite a few like kids animation workshops. People are always keen to kind of do that stuff and get people animating, and it is really fun. You know, you can just get apps like on your phone and start shooting, and that immediacy, like, kids love it. You just give them loads of plasticine and, you know, watch them go nuts, and they're immediately like, okay, how do I make it fly? How do I do this? How do I make this thing? And it's like, whoa, okay, right, we've got a load of new animators. That's great. But all of that stuff, I guess, was supplementary to my main career as an animator. Like, I would do more of that stuff when I had, like, you know, gaps in work. And then during COVID, I kind of made the leap online. So I was working on, what's the platform called? It's not Screen Skills, Skillshare. I did like a class on there, just about like how to animate fire in stop motion. It's like really simple stuff, just to, you know, get to know how the platform worked and stuff. Because, like, for me, I enjoyed doing it, but also it was about getting a certain amount of like passive income coming in as well. And I think you can make quite good money doing that stuff if you dedicate the time and like release on like quite a regular schedule. Like, some people obviously do that full time and that's their job. So I did that during COVID, because obviously stop motion is very like location based, and like everything died overnight, you know, and we were all scared. We thought, like, when are we ever going to be able to work ever again? So that was my way of like making money, but also keeping myself sane by just having something to do and focus on, was that, like, you know, little project. And I would do that stuff again if I had downtime. It's made me a bit more relaxed about the idea of like having gaps between work as well. You know, it's not just like, you know, all or nothing, like destitution. Like, it's going to be okay. You know, I can get money doing this online, so that's good. And in terms of being an educator in the future, I think I quite like doing the talks and the kind of one-off workshops and that kind of thing. I don't really have a plan to like become like a full-time lecturer, but maybe in the future, maybe like kind of part-time stuff. It's such a kind of feast or famine nature of the work that I can't rule anything out. You know, if all of a sudden there's no films in the UK for 5 years, like, sure, I'll lecture. That's fine. But it's always going to be kind of being an animator first.
We come on to the current, and I want to talk about your latest project, because you're working on the new Chicken Run sequel called Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget. What can you tell us about the new film? What's the current state of production? And when will the film be released theatrically?
Well, I'm under NDA, so I can't tell you a whole lot, but I can tell you that it is bigger and more ambitious than the first film. But it crucially feels like Chicken Run, which is important. You know, I think anyone who's a fan of the first film will still really enjoy the second one. And it's also really cool to work on something that I loved, like, as a child. Yeah, it's crazy. You're just holding this puppet. It's like, no, you're not real though. You're the character in that film, and that film was absolutely real. You know. So I think we're maybe just over halfway done shooting. I have no idea when it's coming out, because there's always tons of post that happens after we'll stop shooting, and I don't know what the schedules for any of those are. But it is really great to get to work with Sam Fell, because, you know, he co-directed Paranorman with Chris Butler, and as I was saying before, like, it's a favorite film of mine. So yeah, it's really cool to work with him. But I did write down the little blurb that I found that's been released online.
Okay, yeah.
So when she and Rocky hatch a little girl called Molly, Ginger's happy ending seems complete. But back on the mainland, the whole of chicken kind faces a new and terrible threat. For Ginger and her team, even if it means putting their own hard-won freedom at risk, this time they're breaking in. There you go.
Laura, I want to ask you one final question, and then we move on to that moment where we do the quick fire questions that we ask every single Your Take guest. outside of animation, what are your other interests and hobbies? And would you like to work in any other creative areas away from animation? And then second to that, what are your long-term career plans? And do you have a favorite project you've worked on and why?
Oh, that's a hefty question.
Yeah, there's quite a few questions in there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like for me, it's too easy for like everything to become all about animation. Like, especially when you start out, trying to network. Like, I was just like a total yes man to everything. I was like, helping to do pre-selection for festivals. I was going to festivals. I was helping to set up a festival. I was watching short films in my spare time. I was, watching animations. And it's like, after a little while, it just becomes a little bit too much like an echo chamber, it's a bit microcosmy. And so, especially now, like I'm trying to make time to do other stuff and kind of give more headspace and do things that are like completely separate to animation. I think that's really important. I think, yeah, I mean, when I was in New Zealand, I took up waka ama, and that's like Pacific Maori, like outrigger canoeing, which I absolutely loved. Again, has nothing to do with animation, but it was a 10-minute drive from work and you're doing it on like an ancient volcano crater lake. And it's like, whoa, okay, this is completely nuts. I was just being like shouted at by all these like 60-year-old Kiwis. It was brilliant. And yeah, so I'm trying to like cultivate just, yeah, having things that are separate to animation here. So, I mean, recently I took like a beginner's kayaking course on Bristol Harbour. That was really fun. But I do have a weird specific fear of like metal man-made structures in water. And so doing it on Bristol Harbour was a bit of a problem because, you're going past like the SS Great Britain and stuff. And, every time I like went past the sluice gates, I was just like shuddering inside, like, oh, it's so gross. I love it. What's going on? Whoa, it's a weird feeling. Yeah, and then like other things I've done since coming back. So I started like an improv theatre course. I've been doing that. It was really fun to just like loosen you up a bit. They talk about it being the two scariest things for people is like talking to a crowd and not having a plan. And so in improv, you're doing both of those things, and it's just like kind of practicing those skills and like being brave. And so, yeah, that's been really fun to learn. And also I'm currently doing a course of feminist Kung Fu with my friend Marie. It's very Bristol.
And the last thing I wanted to ask, of all the projects you've worked on the CV or the filmography, as they say, listed on IMDb, is there a favorite project that you're most proud of?
I think probably Robin. It's just such a wonderful production, and the fact that I started on it in like kind of October, November 2020 is like I hadn't seen anyone for months and months and months. Like I'd seen my partner and we were just living in the same house and doing this. And so like to get to be on set, even though we were like, sanitizing and mask wearing and standing far apart and stuff, it was just like to get to work on that. And it was like a magical Christmas land as well, and quite a lot of it, because they're small, the sets are actually like human scale, which is quite rare. Like usually you're working on sets which are like miniature. So yeah, that was a really like magical thing to get to do. And I guess, yeah, you asked about the long-term kind of aspirations as well.
Yeah, the long-term career plans. Is there any goals, specific goals, or is it just kind of just live in the moment?
Well, I want to get better as an animator. I'd love to work on one of the big American features, like, a Leica film, or like Wendell and Wild and Pinocchio that are just coming out, right now. But I also want to direct animation. And so like at the moment, alongside working full time, I'm also making my own like BFI funded short film. So like I applied for that in 2019 when I didn't have a job, and I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to hire myself as an animator. That felt like, a smart move. And since then, I would say that I've been too employed. And so it's just been my boyfriend, Josh, making it. Like he's made all the puppets and he's now animating the majority of it as well. But we shifted that entire production to New Zealand and back, to coincide with working on Kiri and Lou. And it's, yeah, I think we've shot about half of it now. And like that whole process has been a really big undertaking for me, not just like actually making the film and trying to make it look how we want it to look, which is knackering. It takes up every single evening and every single weekend, but it looks good, so it's okay. But I think it's more like a mental shift for me away from like being fearful about making things, because it's so easy to like fear other people's judgment. And like when I was in uni, I didn't want to make like a fantasy short film. I wanted to make an animated documentary, and the reason for doing that is that I didn't believe that I could write anything that would be like good enough for other people, which seems mad to me now, but like I can see it was like coming from like a place of fear and like imposter syndrome. So I was like, well, if I make a documentary, then like that's reality. No one can question that. No one can say that I was wrong for doing that. But if I make like a short film, oh no, that's too scary if it's like fiction that I've just written. And so it's taken a lot to get to the place where like I am happy to make decisions. Even like my decision to apply for the funding, I was on a beach in the Bahamas doing a humanitarian response because a Category 5 hurricane had just hit the islands. So I was there like helping to move food and, you know, coordinate things and get people shelter. And I got an email through saying that I didn't get a place on an MA in directing animation. And the reason that they cited for not giving it to me was that I didn't have enough confidence in my own projects. And I'm sat there thinking like, but you're film school, you're meant to give me the confidence. And it was just a little moment of like big picture, looking at like an absolutely devastated community of people. And I'm here worried about what some people might think about me making a tiny short animated film in Bristol. And it was like, okay, I'm gonna make that decision right now. Like instead of writing a thing, I just did like a video essay thing to the people at Film Cymru and BFI, explaining you know, my film idea and why I thought I needed to make it then. And you know, they took the chance on me, so thank you for that. And since then it's been such a big process of just not seeking other people's approval for things, because like as an animator you are literally seeking approval from the director, you know, that's part of the job. But in a wider sense, it's like being worried that you're making the wrong decisions and then not making decisions. And so it's been really good for me to like push and have to make this. And I feel like I'm kind of coming out near the other end. Like I'm still working on this mentally, but that I think has been the biggest change for me. But I want to, yeah, it's meant to be like my first step on the ladder of being a director, but it's going to end up taking 5 years from start to finish because we've been working on other things in between. But yeah, the plan is after that I would love to be like represented by one of the big London commercials houses. You know, I'd love to make like music videos and commercials and stuff like that, just to you know, get a bit more like pace in my work. There's nothing like making a 5-year short film to make you want a bit more like, come on, let's a few more ideas coming through here. And like long-term lofty ideals, I want to direct feature films if I can. So yeah, you have to set your intention, otherwise it won't happen, I suppose. That's my intention.
Laura, we move on to that time, the time in the interview when we asked the final quickfire 13 questions to maybe find out things we've not established during the course of our conversation. Don't need to think about these in any depth. Here we go. Number 1, Laura, what would you say is your favorite pastime?
Playing video games. I think it's escapism, makes me feel content.
Do you have a favorite console?
No, I mostly game on my laptop, but one of my favorite video games is Psychonauts. If you've ever played it, it's really good. It's someone going into lots of different people's brains, and so the levels are like, you know, different people's minds and what those look like, and you have to help them solve their problems. It's good.
Cinema now, and you've cited many influences already, but if you could choose your favorite film, what would it be and why?
This is like an impossible question.
I'd have to choose about 20.
Yeah, I know. Well, that was yeah, it makes me feel like weirdly defensive, like it's all these things. Okay, so I've settled on Chungking Express, which was directed by Wong Kar-wai, and the DOP was Christopher Doyle. So it's kind of, you know, Hong Kong new wave in the 90s, and it's so evocative of that moment. Like I couldn't even tell you the plot exactly, and it's not the film that I've watched the most often, but I just absolutely love it. It kind of has these super 90s visuals and songs by like the Cranberries and the Mamas and the Papas, California Dreaming, just like haunting in the background. And like I first watched it as a film student in Hong Kong and I just fell in love with it, so I'm gonna go with that.
He's a great director. I did see it during the lockdown actually, and I need to see, I think it's Mood for Love, which a lot of people cite as probably one of his strongest works. But yeah, an interesting choice. From cinema to novelists, who would you cite as your favourite?
I'm not a huge reader. I like to think of myself as like, oh yeah, I like to read books. Like I couldn't tell you the last book I even read. I love Neil Gaiman, maybe because he wrote Coraline. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
I'm a little bit the same. I'm more of a cinema man than a reader. I can cite the names, but never read the books. Laura, if you could have chosen a different profession outside of animation or creativity, what would it have been?
Outside of creativity.
Oh, it could be still in the arts, but maybe in a completely different field.
Yeah, I mean, I need like 10 lifetimes to do like all the things that I want to do. So like, I'm gonna be an actress. I'm gonna do this, gonna do that. I wanted to be a doctor for the longest time. And I think in one of the work gaps in between some jobs, I actually went to like Swansea Uni to look around like the graduate entry medicine program. Don't know, wanting to save the world. I think humanitarian disaster response. I love that kind of stuff. It's like it's helping people, but it's also like the logistical side of things, and like how do we get water to people in these small communities? How do we, it's teamwork, like towards a very specific goal. And I mean, I feel like I am still doing that, but I just have to like balance it out with when I'm not working, to try and get that balance in my life. There's like the absolute escapism being on set with the plasticine chickens versus the real world, and sometimes one overtakes the other. But yeah.
Laura, who would you cite as your greatest inspiration in life?
This is a really hard question. I don't know if I can attribute this to one individual. I mean, I remember the people who are kind and the people who supported me. I've had lots of like moments of change and revelation, like from the guidance of other people, and I strive to keep pushing towards that change, and like be brave and be open to that change.
This one's always an interesting one. We ask our guests to tell us the newspaper they read, or if they read a newspaper, which one. They tend to always choose the same one, so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Do you read a newspaper? If so, which one?
No. I get my news from like the BBC website, I guess, because it's meant to be impartial, but also I worked in WH Smith for a really long time, and I had to be there really early in the morning to like put the things inside the newspapers on the weekend, and I would make the connection between like the type of people who are buying which type of newspaper, and I just found that so scary that people would delineate along those lines so clearly. And I was like, I don't want to be put into a pigeonhole like that, Yeah.
That rang a lot of bells, because that's the job I got to do tomorrow, Sunday. Put a load of magazine inserts into newspapers, and sometimes when I'm doing it, I'm cussing and thinking, can they do it their end? But hey ho.
Yeah, and you get black bits from the ink.
Yeah, and you try and work out which one goes with which, and there's about 5 in one newspaper. It's all a little bit. You need a PhD. We talk about cuisine now. What would you say is your favorite food?
Sushi, for sure. Absolutely love it. It's cute. It's tiny. It's I thought I didn't like wasabi to start with because it tastes a bit like petrol, but I've come around to it, and now I just always put way too much on every single one and like completely give myself like a sinus cleanse whenever I eat it. But yeah, I love it. Good salmon nigiri.
From cuisine to unusually now cultural icons, who would you cite as your favorite cultural icon? Stumps a lot of our guests. It could be maybe a political figure, humanitarian perhaps, an inventor, could even be a filmmaker. Who would you choose?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what a cultural icon was, and I googled it and I couldn't quite work out what the question meant. I don't know. I put down like Bjork and Kate Bush because I was thinking like iconic people. But I guess, yeah, it was those kind of people who it just makes it feel okay to be a weirdo, and that's what you need when you're a weird teenage girl trying to work out what you're doing with your life. It's important.
Two interesting choices, and two very distinctive, creative women who pretty much have done things the way they wanted to do it. And it's nice to see Kate Bush kind of almost be reevaluated with the running up that hill being used in Stranger Things and going to #1. And I always find she comes across as such a humble woman as well. Yeah. From cultural icons now to curse words, what would you say is your favorite curse word and why?
I know how to swear in 10 languages, but I can't talk in those languages. So my favorite one is shiwai, which is FU in Korean. My colleague taught me in Kiri and Lou. Thanks, Kang.
Move from curse words now to favorite places or holiday destinations. And you mentioned about travel earlier on in the interview. What is your favorite place?
I think you can probably guess this. It's Hong Kong. It's just such an incredible city. It's like parts of it like smell like dried fish, and it's like when it rains it looks like a full-on cyberpunk, you know. It's just so good. I'm not sure I even have the words for it. It's
looks like something from Blade Runner, something like that.
Yes, absolutely. And go to Chungking Mansions, and so that's where Chungking Express was like based and filmed. And read up about the Kowloon Walled Garden, and I love it.
We briefly touched upon music because you mentioned Kate Bush and Bjork, but who would you say is your favorite music artist, and do you have an all-time favorite album?
This is another impossible question. So I can't cite just like one person or one album, but I can give you like a flavor of where I'm coming from, I suppose. So like my baseline as like a teenager was always like the Smiths, Kate Bush, Radiohead. So kind of quite introspective music, but just made it feel okay in the world when you're listening to that stuff, I guess. And like Radiohead especially, like always evolving. So the Kid Amnesiac album, which came out as kind of re-releases of some of those old tracks from those two albums, but also some new ones which kind of fit the theme of those albums. So I absolutely loved that. And I kind of moved to like electronic weirdness and like electro pop. But right now, I absolutely love Gabriel's, like what they're putting out is amazing. Like the guy's voice sounds like Paul Robeson, you know, he's just got this incredible lush voice. And then I like Remy Wolf and Michael Kiwanuka, who I was lucky enough to see at Green Man Festival. I was just down the front crying, like, oh my god, this is so beautiful. Like I got his album in lockdown, and it was just amazing, so well deserved for the Mercury Prize as well. And then also Wesley Gonzalez, who I'm not sure I even know how to describe it. I guess it's pop in some kind of way, but just really strange, janky, off-kilter stuff. So I guess it's a big old mix of like, you know, soaring, powerful, beautiful stuff and like funk and soul, spangly pop. We all contain multitudes. I'm sorry, I can't pick one.
And now the final two questions. What would you say is your greatest achievement to date?
I think it's times when I've had to push myself out of my comfort zone. So when I was doing like the humanitarian disaster response, that was with a charity who were called Team Rubicon and now called React. And they mostly work with like ex-military people, like, sometimes ex-police or, ambulance staff. And it's kind of giving people who have these incredible skills who are now back in like the civilian world and like sometimes can lose their way ever so slightly, and it kind of helps to give them purpose and to put those incredible skills that they have to use. And so, you know, I was deployed with them. But I deliberately chose that NGO to work with because I knew that it would push me outside my comfort zone. You know, it's completely removed from my kind of lefty filmmaking crowd, which otherwise I would be surrounded by that all the time, you know, and I try and push myself out of that. And also, I went to India to volunteer with VSO, and that was incredible, just like pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And we worked in China as well for like 2 or 3 months in northern China, a place called Changchun, which is like 2 hours drive from the North Korean border. And again, it was just like total shock to the system, like needing to reevaluate, needing to think on your feet. I feel like that's when you grow as a person, when you're like, when you feel really, really scared to do something and you do it anyway. That's when I feel most proud of myself.
And then lastly, Laura Tofarides, how do you wish to be remembered?
This is a hard question. I don't know, I want to get good at my job and everything and be remembered for my work, but I think what's most important is to just be kind, just radical kindness, because, you know, those are the people that I remember, and it's so important to always remember the human in every situation that you're in. So I'm gonna go with that.
A nice note to end on. Laura, thanks for being a guest on Your Take, sharing your career journey and your life journey this evening and giving up your Saturday evening. Been a really interesting, I don't like to say interview, conversation, and thanks for sharing with us the projects you've worked on, your influences, your inspirations, and wish you all the very best with the new Chicken Run film, the sequel, all future projects, and hopefully to achieve your goal to one day be a director. So I wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.